Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
This video looks at immigration in the United States during the time Donald Trump was president. From January, when he started his job, immigration became a very important topic. This chapter gives a general idea of what this video is about. During his time as president, Donald Trump talked a lot about immigration. He made promises about changing the system. He said he would build a wall on the border with Mexico. He also talked about sending more people who were in the country without permission back to their home countries. This video will explore what happened with immigration during his presidency. It will look at what promises were made and what actions were taken. We will see what rules and laws changed and how these changes affected people. We will also look at the numbers and data to understand what happened with immigration during this time. It is important to understand that immigration is a complex issue with many different sides. This video will try to present information in a neutral way. It will not take sides or say whether the actions taken were good or bad. The goal is to give a clear picture of what happened and what the different parts of the story are. We will look at different questions. For example, what were the main goals of the immigration policies? How were these policies put into action? What were the results of these policies? And how did different people react to these changes? By looking at all these different questions, we can get a better understanding of immigration in the U.S. during this period. This video aims to provide information that is easy to understand and helps to see the different aspects of this important topic. It is important to learn about this topic in a fair and balanced way. 2. Promises made. During his time running for president, Donald Trump talked a lot about immigration. He told people what he would do about it if he became president. These promises were a key part of his message to voters. One of the biggest promises was about building a wall. Trump said he would build a large wall on the border between the United States and Mexico. He said this wall would stop people from coming into the U.S. illegally. He often repeated the phrase, "build that wall," at his rallies. This became a very famous promise and a symbol of his plan for immigration. Another important promise was to deport many more people. Trump said he would start a massive and widespread campaign to remove people who were in the country without legal permission. He talked about deporting millions of people. He said he would find them in every nook and cranny of the country. This meant he wanted to increase the work of immigration officers to find and deport people living in the U.S. illegally. Trump also promised to stop people from entering the U.S. in the first place. He said he would halt all illegal entry. He wanted to make it much harder for people to cross the border without permission. He also said he would end catch and release. This was a policy where some people caught at the border were allowed to stay in the U.S. while they waited for their court dates. Trump said this was a bad system, and he would end it. He wanted to detain people instead of releasing them. He said his goals were to completely discourage new arrivals and to expel more than 10 million people from the country. To stop new people from coming, he planned to bring back some policies from before. One was called Remain in Mexico. This meant that people asking for asylum in the U.S. would have to wait in Mexico while their cases were decided. He also ended a program called Humanitarian Parole, which allowed some people from certain countries to live legally in the U.S. for 2 years if they had support. Trump's message was very clear. He wanted to reduce illegal immigration a lot. He promised strong action and big changes to the immigration system. He said he would be tough on people who were in the U.S. illegally and make it much harder for others to come. These promises were central to his campaigns and showed voters what he planned to do about immigration if he was in power. 3. Actions taken. When Donald Trump became president, he started to act quickly on his promises about immigration. One of the first things he did was to make arrests and deportations faster. He wanted to remove people from the country more quickly than before. To do this, the government started to use more deportation flights. Sometimes, they even used military planes to send people back to their home countries. This caused problems with some countries. For example, Colombia did not want to accept people on military planes. The U.S. put pressure on Colombia, and in the end, Colombia accepted the flights. The government also changed some policies at the border. One policy that came back was called Remain in Mexico. This meant that people asking for asylum had to wait in Mexico while their cases were decided in the U.S. Another change was stopping a program that gave some people from Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, and Nicaragua permission to live and work in the U.S. for 2 years. These changes made it harder for people to enter the U.S. and ask for protection. The government made it clear that many people could be deported. This included people who had been in the country for some time, even if they had permission to be there temporarily. One example was people from Venezuela who had temporary protected status, TPS. The government considered stopping TPS for them because of a gang from Venezuela. This meant that people who had been allowed to stay in the U.S. could now be deported. To find people to deport, immigration agents increased raids across the country. There were reports of agents using different methods to find people, sometimes even pretending to be local police. The goal was to arrest and deport as many people as possible. The government set a very ambitious goal: to deport 1 million people in a year. To do this, they planned many flights and operations. However, it was not easy to reach this goal. There were problems with the number of flights, places to keep people who were arrested, and the cost of these operations. To deal with the large number of people they wanted to detain, there was even talk of using places like Guantanamo Bay Prison. This prison is usually used for very dangerous criminals. There was also discussion about sending people to prisons in other countries. To make these deportations happen, the government considered using old laws. One law from 1798, called the Alien Enemies Act, could allow the government to deport people more quickly during a war. Some people thought this law could be used to deport immigrants, even though there was no war in the traditional sense. This idea was controversial, and it was not clear if it would be legal. These actions showed that the government was taking a strong stance on immigration. The focus was on removing people from the country and discouraging others from coming to the U.S. without permission. 4. Numbers and data. This chapter looks at numbers related to immigration during the time of Donald Trump's presidency. It focuses on data about different parts of immigration policies. One important area is deportations. The Trump administration aimed to increase the number of people deported from the U.S. There was a plan to deport a large number of people. One goal mentioned was to deport 1 million people in a year. Before this, during the Obama administration and in Trump's first years, the number of deportations was around 500,000 each year. The aim was to make this number much bigger. To do this, the administration took several steps. The video talks about increasing arrests and deportations. It mentions using military planes for deportation flights. These flights can be expensive. For example, one flight to Guatemala with 80 people cost about $250,000. If many flights are needed, the total cost can be very high. Estimates suggest that deporting 1 million people could cost around $90 billion. The video also mentions the number of people waiting for asylum in the U.S. It says around 2.6 million people were waiting for asylum decisions inside the country. Another 600,000 people were under a program called humanitarian parole. Some of these programs were changed or stopped. This meant that many people could face deportation processes. The goal was also to stop people from coming to the U.S. Policies like Remain in Mexico were brought back. This policy meant people seeking asylum had to wait in Mexico for their U.S. policy immigration appointments. A program that gave some people from Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, and Nicaragua legal residency was also stopped. These changes affected the number of people who could enter the U.S. to ask for asylum or residency. The video notes that even with these plans, it was not easy to deport very large numbers of people quickly. There were many steps involved, like arrests, detention, and flights. The system faced pressure to increase the number of deportations, but it was a complex and large task. The numbers show the scale of the efforts and the potential costs of these immigration policies during this period. 5. Stories of people. The immigration policies had a big effect on many people. These are some of their stories. Imagine a family. They have lived in the U.S. for many years. The parents work hard. Their children go to school. They are part of their community, but they live with fear. New rules made it easier for the government to arrest and deport people. Suddenly, going to work or taking children to school became scary. People worried about raids. They heard stories about people being taken away. Families were afraid of being separated. Children worried their parents would not come home. Some people were stopped by police. This happened at work, at home, or in the street. People were asked to show documents. If they did not have the right papers, they could be arrested. Then, they could be sent to detention centers. These are places where people are kept while waiting for decisions about their immigration cases. Life in these centers could be hard. For some, the process was fast. The government wanted to deport many people quickly. Some were put on planes and sent back to their home countries. Sometimes, these flights were on military planes. People said they were treated like criminals, even if they had not done anything wrong other than being in the country without papers. Immigration lawyers and groups tried to help people. They worked to explain the new rules. They helped people with their cases. They saw how the policies affected individuals. They heard stories of families broken apart. They saw people lose their jobs and homes. Border Patrol agents also had a role. They were responsible for finding and arresting people at the border and inside the country. Their work changed with the new policies. They had to follow new orders to find more people and deport them faster. These stories show that immigration policies are not just numbers and rules. They are about real people. They are about families, workers, and communities. The changes in immigration rules created uncertainty and fear for many. People's lives were changed in big ways. 6. Rules and laws. In the United States, there are rules and laws about who can enter and stay in the country. These rules are complex and have changed over time. During the Trump administration, some existing laws were used in new ways, and new policies were made that changed how immigration was handled. One important law mentioned is from 1798, called the Alien Enemies Act. This old law was made for times of war. It says that if there is a war, people from the enemy country who are in the U.S. can be arrested and sent away. Some people discussed using this law to deal with immigrants, suggesting that illegal immigration was like a war. However, it is not clear if this law can be used in this way in normal times, and there are legal questions about it. Another law mentioned is Title 8 of the United States Code, Section 1325. This law says that entering the U.S. illegally is a crime. The Trump administration focused on this law, saying that anyone who enters the country without permission breaks the law and could be deported. There is also a system called Temporary Protected Status, TPS. TPS is for people from certain countries who cannot safely return home because of dangerous situations like war or natural disasters. TPS allows these people to live and work in the U.S. temporarily. However, the Trump administration changed how TPS was used. For example, TPS for people from Venezuela was discussed. The government considered ending TPS for Venezuelans because of a criminal group from Venezuela. This shows how laws can be changed or used differently, and how this can affect people with legal status. Legal challenges to immigration policies are also important. When new policies are made, they can be questioned in courts. People can argue that a policy is against the law or the Constitution. This happened with some of the Trump administration's immigration policies. Courts had to decide if these policies were legal. These legal challenges are a key part of how rules and laws about immigration are understood and followed in the U.S. Overall, the legal framework for immigration in the U.S. is made of different laws, court decisions, and agreements. During the Trump years, there were many discussions and changes about how these rules were applied, and there were legal arguments about these changes. Understanding these rules and laws is important to understand what happened with immigration during this time. 7. Reactions. Many people had strong feelings about the immigration policies. Some people agreed with the changes, and some people disagreed. Other countries reacted to these policies too. Some countries did not like how the U.S. was treating immigrants. For example, when the U.S. wanted to send people back to Colombia using military planes, the president of Colombia, Mr. Petro, said no. This caused a problem between the two countries. The U.S. threatened to stop visas and trade with Colombia. In the end, Colombia accepted the people back, but used their own planes. Another leader, Mr. Lula from Brazil, also spoke about the way immigrants were treated on planes. He said it was not good to see people in handcuffs, without air conditioning, and without water. Inside the U.S., different groups had different reactions. Some groups who are more conservative liked the new rules. They thought it was important to stop people from entering the country illegally. They supported the idea of deporting people who were in the U.S. without permission. However, other people and groups were worried. They said that treating all immigrants as criminals was wrong. They said that many immigrants are just looking for work and a better life. Some people pointed out that many immigrants do jobs that Americans do not want to do. Businesses also reacted. Some business owners, especially in construction and farming, were worried. They said that if many immigrants were deported, there would not be enough workers. This could make things more expensive and slow down the economy. Some people were scared because of the new policies. Immigrants and their families worried about being arrested and sent away. Some people even thought about leaving the U.S. because they were afraid. There were different opinions about using military planes for deportations. Some people thought it was necessary for security. Other people thought it was too much and looked bad. Overall, Trump's immigration policies caused many different reactions. Some people supported them strongly, while others were very against them. These reactions came from inside the U.S. and from other countries around the world. 8. Looking back. This chapter looks back at what we have discussed about immigration during the Trump administration. We have explored different parts of this topic in the previous chapters. First, we talked about the promises made. During his campaigns, Mr. Trump spoke a lot about changing immigration. He promised to build a wall on the border and to deport more people who were in the country without permission. Then, we looked at the actions that were taken. During his time as president, some new policies were put in place. There were changes to how visas were given, and rules about asylum became different. The government also tried to increase security at the border. We saw that there were efforts to arrest and deport more people. Sometimes, military planes were used for deportations. We also considered numbers and data. We saw information about border crossings, deportations, and visas. These numbers showed some changes during this period. We shared stories of people. We learned about the experiences of different people affected by these immigration policies. This included immigrants themselves, and also people working at the border and lawyers. We talked about the rules and laws. Immigration in the United States is based on laws and court decisions. There were legal challenges to some of the new policies, and we mentioned some of these. Reactions to these policies were varied. Different groups and people had different opinions. Politicians, groups that support immigrants, and international organizations all had something to say. People in the public also had different views. So, looking back, we have seen that the Trump administration made big promises about immigration and took actions to change things. There were changes in numbers and real effects on people's lives. There were also different opinions about these changes. This chapter is a summary of what we have learned. Now, it is up to you to think about all of this information and decide what you think.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.